Hello, everyone. Welcome into the latest Flyers Talk podcast. Ashlyn Sullivan, Joe Fordyce, Al Morganti here with you, breaking down the first round of the NHL draft and the Flyers' two selections at 7 and 22. It is a late evening, 10:30, and the Flyers selecting Matvei Michkov with the 7th overall pick. He's a Russian winger and signed right now in the Continental Hockey League through the 2025 season. But an excellent shot. Al, let's get right to it and break down the 7th overall pick. Some people calling this a franchise-altering choice, but you get the confusion of him staying through 2025, but it seems like he certainly has the talent.
Yeah, Ashlyn, if you look at it, you might not have won the Bedard lottery, but you came pretty darn close in just terms of raw talent with this guy. As much as we say we know, we just take the word of a lot of scouts, a lot of players, whomever. Not many of us have seen many games, but from all intents and purposes, you look at numbers, he's racked up numbers that exceed Ovechkin as a kid, that exceed anybody that's ever played over there. So in my mind, they got the second best talent in the draft. So they worked pretty hard to do it. They convinced themselves that this is a solid pick. And of course, there's risk involved. And you're dealing with a league over there that you just don't know what's going to happen beyond hockey. But I think well worth the risk when you look at where the Flyers are right now.
Right. And Joe, when you think about it and say he is there through 2025, it kind of fits the strategy of the Flyers right now, this rebuilding strategy that they now have 3 seasons to figure out what they want to do with this roster in time for this offensive firepower to come to Philadelphia.
Right, and you have Cutter Gauthier, who is going to play another season in college. So you're building for a few years down the road, and we all knew that's what it was going to take. And, I don't know that everybody wants to hear that, but at least the message is consistent. And it has been all along ever since Danny Briere and Jonesy took over the operation. The message has been, we're going to do this the right way, and Tortorella stressed it last year, even before Jonesy and Briere were in at the controls. This is not going to happen overnight. So that falls right in line. I guess the risk part of it is, it's a little dicey. I mean, we saw what happened with Artemi Panarin with the Rangers a few years ago when he had, or maybe that was last year, I can't remember. Sometime in the last 2 seasons, he had to take a leave from the Rangers because of the family concerns with Russia. I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen, and the political nature of what goes on with that country, it's always a question mark. So, but you can't argue with the talent, as Al said. I mean, the only reason I think that he fell to the Flyers at 7 is because of those type of concerns. And so, that's, if you got a franchise altering player 7th in the draft, that is a pretty special pick and a pretty, I would say medium risk, high reward pick by the Flyers. And, at this point in time, you have to aim high. And if they thought that was the best talent on the board, then there you go. I mean, when I was looking at the board, I was thinking Ryan Leonard. I'd mentioned Ryan Leonard on this podcast last week. I got sucked in by the Matthew Tkachuk comparisons and Mark Stone and the recency buy with the Mark Stone winning the, most valuable player of the playoffs with Vegas this year. And you kind of start to imagine what that would look like for a Flyers team. So I think I was kind of expecting them to go with Leonard, but it seemed like you couldn't go wrong with either player at that point. Obviously Leonard goes next to the Capitals right after the Flyers pick.
Right. And now when you think about the 3-year mark, Danny Briere, general manager, said it himself last week in his pre-draft availability that he's really not worried about next season, or frankly 2 seasons from now. The Flyers are just in a position where they need more high-end talent, a lot of it. And this just kind of seems to start that momentum where you can't really worry about timelines. You just need, frankly, more good players.
Yeah, how many times have we done post game and we just said, where are the hands? I mean, how they eat their meal without hands. It's one of those things. Where are you shootout? How are you going to get a goal? Who's going to be the game breaker? And this is a kid that would be a game breaker. I don't know about the 3 years as much as it's risky one way. I just don't even know what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow it's 2 years. Something, you just don't know. You're dealing with that unknown. To me, the real breakthrough in this was the fact that we just saw what they did with the Provorov trade. It was very convoluted, very complex, took a lot of work. I think the fact that they somehow managed to get a couple of face-to-face meetings with this kid was really important. I think it was important that everybody knew the skills that they had, but to be able to actually see what he was about, so to speak, to go way beyond analytics, kind of look into his eyes and say, is this character worth the risk? And then the brief interview that we saw at the draft, he really seemed anxious and wanting to come to Philadelphia. So I give him full marks for getting to the player a couple of times, which is not easy, getting to him and then getting a good read on him that you felt comfortable doing this, and somehow not letting Washington jump up. And, the hockey gods were good that Arizona did what they did, which was shocking to me, to give you a chance to get either, this player or Joe's choice, Leonard's. You had your choice there. And I think on balance, if you really looked at it, say if you had those two players to pick from and you felt comfortable after meeting with him that he was going to come over and play, I think it was an easy choice.
Right. And it was on the ESPN broadcast where Danny Briere said that Michkov basically convinced the Flyers that he was the guy. And this is something he always wanted to play for this team. And Danny was very honest that after those meetings, it was clear that Michkov, it was only the Flyers.
Yeah, and then I think right after that, they were talking about how the Flyers are a worldwide brand, which I found to be interesting when you consider this pick and the messaging by the new hierarchy about returning the Flyers to what they once were. And I think that worldwide brand is exactly what they mean by, getting them back to where they kind of the stature that they were once at. And, this will go a long way. I mean, if this kid turns into a star for this team, that's certainly going to have, massive appeal. So far, I think you can't really argue with much that Danny Briere has done. The Kevin Hayes trade it seemed like it could have been bigger, but, a few things got in the way. Torrey Krug didn't want to waive his no movement clause and things like that. And we all think that, at least I presume we all think there's going to be more moves down the pike here. And, but to me, I would say aside from the talent they got with the number 7 pick, and then, of course, with Oliver Bonk, you have the NHL pedigree with his father, Radek, who played almost 1,000 games in this league. A big takeaway of mine, and Al, I'm curious what you think about this too, is that there were no trades. I think one of the last things I expected to happen tonight was them to just come in and pick at 7 and 22. And I'm not sure if you felt the same, Al, but there just seemed to be a lot of smoke and then no fire in terms of all of the trade discussion.
Yeah, I sort of thought they were going to have to move up to get this kid. I was pretty convinced that this was the kid they had in their sights because of the meetings they had with him. So I thought they were going to have to move up. I presume they did their homework somehow on what was going to fall in front of them that fell the way that it did. So I was a little bit surprised at that. But beyond the Flyers, there really was no action in this round. I'm assuming them now the next round, perhaps more. And as they head toward free agency on Canada Day there, maybe there's a whole bunch of movement. But like you, I thought, something could happen. I actually thought, now they're going to have to do something to make sure that if they convince themselves they want him, that's what you can never know that. but I have to think they had a pretty good idea of how this was going to go, that they didn't have to move up and move. I know they didn't want to move a draft pick, but I think they liked this kid enough. They would have been tempted.
Yeah. And it's time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And Al, Joe mentioned it, and I think we should maybe discuss it a little more at length, is the Kevin Hayes trade to the St. Louis Blues to get a 2024 sixth-round pick, and the Flyers keeping 50% of Kevin Hayes' salary. And we saw the Twitter freak out and fans saying, that's all you got for Kevin Hayes. But I know this was definitely something where we all thought Kevin Hayes most likely wasn't going to be with the Flyers next season. And you kind of had to get what you could get for him at this point, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I was surprised that he got traded. I thought they were going to have to buy him out, and that was the only alternative. Part of the deal here is, and I like John Tortorella as a coach, and I like where the organization is, his demands. The downside of John Tortorella as a coach, if it's a downside, and perhaps it isn't even a downside, is that if he's decided as a coach that you're not going to play, you ain't going to play. And it puts management in a tough spot, because everybody in the hockey world knew Kevin Hayes ain't going to play and D'Angelo's not going to play. So now you're left with, how are we going to move this person? Everybody knows that that's not going to happen. So, and Danny did a couple of smart things here. If you noticed in his language all the time when talking about Hayes, he always called him a centerman, which is worth more. And he is a centerman, but he wasn't going to play center for John Tortorella. And it devalues you to then be the winger there. So, I mean, Danny did a good job kind of pumping that up a little bit. And just to get anything, look, a lot of leagues have turned into this. It's, to be honest, it's almost like divorce. You're going to have to buy your way. You're going to have to buy your way out a little bit. You're going to have to get somebody to take the ex-spouse off your hands, and that's basically what's happened in a lot of leagues. Not just the NHL. Just it's money that you're dealing with. So they're going to have to retain some of the money. I don't understand how fans could be that say, "Oh, he only got a 6." Well, really. I didn't think they were going to get anything. I actually thought they're going to be forced to buy him out.
Right. So 6th-round pick is better for that reason. All right, let's get to the second pick. Or Joe, do you have something about Kevin?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was surprised to hear they would take half of his salary. Because as you said, Al, it's almost like someone holding a hand of cards and they have nothing. But everybody can see they have nothing, but yet they're still there trying to tell you that they have something. And the Tortorella factor puts the hand out on the table.
Yeah,
it really does. I mean, he showed you late in the year, not even late in the year, but started in the middle of the year, that this guy's just not my kind of player. And, you know, Kevin didn't hide it in talking to the media. He knew the message that was sent to him. He said it on his exit interview. So everyone knew this was coming down the pike. And so, I mean, I think the fact that you got the word yes from another team is, when people ask, did they get enough? To me, the word yes is enough, because then you don't buy them out, as you mentioned. And beyond that, I don't know how you could be miffed in any way that they got a 6th-round pick and retained half the salary.
Right. All right, guys, let's get to the 22nd pick. The Flyers select Oliver Bonk. He's a right-handed shooting defenseman. That was an area that was a little weak, and they're adding to that. Al, what did you think of this pick?
Well, make me feel older than I am again, because I've covered his dad for so many years in this league. Actually made me feel as old as I am. I couldn't be much older. And it was he's a solid defenseman from all reports. It's a two-way defenseman, which is what they need. And if you want to build an organization, you have to build the defense. The pity of this is, it's for a lot of fans, like, we've gone through this before. Sanheim, Provorov, it looked like we built those people, and now it was false hope. Well, you have to hope this isn't false hope. I like the fact, obviously, as Joe mentioned, it's got the pedigree in the league, so you know what it takes. I don't think he's a flashy kind of a player. I think he's more going to be a solid two-way guy if it all works out. So you load up on defensemen. I got to think with that pedigree, he's going to play in the league. How high a ceiling it is, I have no idea. But I know that if you're serious about rebuilding, you better get that defense built up.
Yeah, and I think I do think that they were going to take a defenseman with one of these top 2 picks, and if David Reinbacher would have fell to them at 7, maybe that's the direction they go. If things would have fallen differently, he was the top defenseman on the board, and we talked about him at length last week on this podcast or the other day, and so they had to go defenseman with this later pick, and at this point, I don't think when you're building as the Flyers are, you don't need flash on the back end. I mean, at this point, when you look at their back end, they traded Provorov already. I think everyone thinks D'Angelo will be out of here once it hits that year mark, because it seems like it would have already happened if it was past the full year of him coming to the Flyers from Carolina by free agency. So there's 2 guys out, and if you believe what you read, Travis Sanheim's been dangled in trades. So I mean, this is a defense core that's really, really in flux. I mean, it's Cam York, it's Rasmus Ristolainen, and beyond that, I'm not really sure what we're looking at. And then when you look at their depth in their organization, not just the Flyers, but right-hand defensemen, I mean, after Ronnie Attard, you're looking really thin. And so they need to address that too, because, it's a lot of this building is not just about names and guys that are going to be here right away. It's about depth. You see the teams that win, they have depth, guys they can go to. Injuries happen, guys come up, guys fill in, guys play up in the lineup. And so when you're a team like the Flyers that needs as much as they do, you have to look at weaknesses in your organization as a whole. And I think they did that with this 22nd pick, and I think they satisfied a big need.
Agreed, guys. And quickly before I let you go, the Flyers have 8 picks remaining tomorrow. They have no second rounder, but 2 third rounders out. What do you think still the biggest need the Flyers need to address tomorrow?
I think it'll be just like Joe said, depth, getting players to develop. We already seen the change up top and the development of people that are going to lead the development of players. I think they'll get some input into what kind of player that they want, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make a move. When you have a lot of young players, you do want veterans around that they can follow. I know it'll help Couturier, Atkinson come back, but maybe another. The difficulty there is some players, and you can't blame them at a certain point, don't want to go to a place where there's no chance of getting your name on a cup, or for that matter, maybe making the playoffs. So it's a difficult challenge to get that leader or the guy that's going to set some kind of model in your locker room. And generally that's a guy with this coach, maybe that's played for him before, that wants to be part of that, or a guy very deep in his career. So I think you'll get some movement there to get a couple of veteran players to come in and help that development.
Joe, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to come. And maybe we see more of that activity that we kind of alluded to here. Maybe we see it starting with the later round picks, maybe some players involved, but we have 5 more rounds tomorrow and then free agency coming right down the pike. So I think there'll be a lot of negotiating, a lot of moving going on over the next week or so here. And, that's what we all expect. And, the hierarchy of this team hasn't really minced words when it's come to talking about that. So, I mean, John Tortorella has been talking about it since, 10 games into the season last year, about guys that are going to move and guys that aren't going to, they have to determine the guys that aren't going to be here, aren't going to fit into this. And, I think they're working their way down the list. With Hayes, and obviously the D'Angelo move seems like it's just a wait until it can be made type of thing. And, it'll be busy. I know that.
Yes. Who's going to be on the Flyers bus? Never forget it.
Yes. That was that's the famous quote. I will say, Ashlyn, I thought there were a couple around the league, a couple of big surprises in this draft. And I'm sure, first off, Leo Carlsson going second. I think everyone assumed that Adam Fantilli was the second pick. I mean, it wasn't talked about as certain as Bedard, but it was talked about almost in those terms. So I was surprised by that. And then the fact that Zach Benson fell all the way to Buffalo with pick 13. Those were a couple things that stood out to me, Al. I'm not sure if anything else jumped out to you.
Well, the sixth pick jumped out to me.
Yeah. That's another one. Yeah, I mean,
that gave the Flyers a choice of two really good players. I was stunned. I know on TV they didn't make that much of it. They did seem a little bit surprised. I was like, what? What?
Yeah.
It's like, you got to be kidding me. What did you pay these people to do this?
Yeah, you got to wonder what the odds were. The odds were for Michkov not to be the first Russian taken in this draft had to be crazy, because everyone just assumed it was him. And then the other thing I'll mention is, the Fantilli thing. We've talked a lot about how Columbus is in rebuild mode, but their rebuild, they seem to have the pedal to the floor. And I think Fantilli fits right into this speed rebuild. They signed Johnny Gaudreau before last season. They have Zach Werenski coming back. Now they get Fantilli. I mean, that team could look scary in a few years. And, the Flyers could be staring down this gauntlet of young talent that they're stacking up there. So that's another thing that stood out to me because of them being in the Flyers division. That's some scary prospects when you look at what the Blue Jackets could look like a few years down the road here.
Yes, an exciting night tonight and an exciting day tomorrow. The Flyers still have 8 picks remaining, no second rounders, so we'll see if there's any movement there, any trades possibly tomorrow. We're going to break it all down again tomorrow for Joe Fordyce and Al Morganti. I am Ashlyn Sullivan. That is another episode of Flyers Talk. We will see you tomorrow.